Support for Veterans Corner Radio is made possible by M&M Printing and the Observer News of Ruskin, Florida.
Hello and welcome to Veterans Corner Radio Podcasts, information for and about veterans. For this edition of the podcast, host Joe Mulberger has a conversation with retired United States Navy Captain Robert Rocky Rochford. Raised in Scituate, Massachusetts, on the Atlantic coast, Rocky was designed for a life at sea. Upon graduation from the Massachusetts Maritime Academy in 1985, Rocky was commissioned as an ensign in our Naval Reserve. A shift in the commercial shipping industry had him exchange his reserve commission for an active duty commission. Serving 33 continuous years on active duty, Rocky was able to see the world. Upon retirement in 2018, Rocky became involved in politics and today is running for Congress. Here now is Joe Mulberger with Veterans Corner Radio on Veterans Corner Radio Podcasts.
Welcome to Veterans Corner Radio, a show dedicated to providing information to all those who have served our country's military and to their families. Now, here is your host, combat veteran and educator, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Joe Mulberger.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's show. You're listening to Veterans Corner Radio. I'm your host, Joe Mulberger. Today we have, as a special guest, United States Navy retired Captain Robert Rochford. You'd go by Rocky, is that right?
Yes, it's pronounced Rochford, but yeah, and that's why my nickname is Rocky, because no one knows how to pronounce my last name, and that goes all the way back to high school.
How about that? Rocky, tell us a little bit about yourself. When were you born, and where were you born?
So I was born in 1963, October the 1st. I was born at Holyoke Hospital, which is in western Massachusetts, and my parents, when I was 8 months old, moved to Scituate, Massachusetts, which is just south of Boston. It's about halfway between Boston and Plymouth, right on the water. So I grew up on the water, and I grew up there. And then when it was time to go to college, I went to the Massachusetts Maritime Academy, and I graduated in there in 1985, and then I went into the Navy.
Now, growing up on the water and Scituate. So I'm an upstate New Yorker. We used to go to New England quite a bit. And if memory serves me right, isn't Scituate part of Plymouth County in Massachusetts?
Yes, sir, it is.
Isn't it also known as the most Irish town in America?
Yes, sir, it is. I mean, so I grew up with all O'Briens and Murphys and, and people with very short tempers. And my grandmother on my father's side, her last name was Fitzgibbon, so that puts me clearly smack dab in the middle of the Irish piece. But yeah. And our claim to fame was we had more package stores per capita than any other town in America.
Well, that's a lot of Americana right there, especially with the connection to Ireland. And specifically, if I remember right, Limerick, Ireland, because it's almost like if the two shores were to connect, it would be from Western Ireland and that portion of Eastern United States. It's quite a historical place to be from, and what a great place to grow up. The Irish Riviera of sorts, right?
It is. And that's exactly what Scituate's nickname is, the Irish Riviera. And it was originally back in the day when the Irish came to Boston, there wasn't a lot of work. And so they migrated kind of to the South Shore, found Scituate, and Scituate was a big mossing capital of the world. So they would actually go to, they became the mossers, and whatever you do with moss, I don't even know.
So yeah, so again, this is now triggering memories of days gone by of traversing back and forth. So there's actually an Irish moss museum, or a portion of the museum that's there, dedicated to the moss sales bit and the burning of the moss. I guess it's got some kind of value to Ireland as far as a heat source. And then you've got again, this is me scratching from memories, the Irish Heritage Trail, which connects like eight of the villages to Scituate, right? And if I'm catching you off guard, don't worry because this is
No, I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I mean, if it existed back then, I didn't know, and I was very. This was a small town. It was a population of about 15,000 in the winter, and then we would blossom to about 30,000 in the summertime, and we called them the summer people. And they would, they owned houses on the water and down at the lighthouse point. Those were a lot of. They were just summer houses. They weren't designed. Built with heating systems and et cetera, et cetera. So they weren't, they weren't insulated walls. So winters are rough in Scituate. The blizzard of '78 was an amazing storm that blew through, and they, you know, God took an eraser and really erased a lot of Scituate off of the map. We lived about a half a mile from the water, and the beach that was closest to us they were originally right there on Man Hill Beach. It was called. There were 6 houses, and after the storm, there were no houses. They were all completely washed away. They went out to sea, and then there was a lot of debris that was, up into the woods, flooded. I mean, our town was shut down. The entire South Shore was really just completely closed. And I don't know if you recall, but the Route 3 that runs from Boston all the way to the Cape, it's a highway that goes south. People get stranded on that road because the snow was coming down so heavily, and people had nowhere to go. So they abandoned their cars. So there was this highway with miles and miles and miles of cars, and people just abandoned them. And they walked to wherever they could find, an open something and go in, and they kind of rode out the rest of the storm there. But yeah, I mean, we had people that were killed in Scituate trying to be rescued from the floodwaters because it was a perfect storm. You had this nor'easter roll through, a moon high tide, and it caused a storm surge that just eradicated a lot of the low-lying areas of Scituate.
that's quite an unnerving moment in time as you're growing up. But as you're growing up, I mean, with all of that Irish heritage, certainly you weren't raised playing hurling or anything like that. What kind of sporting activities did you get into? Was it associated with the sea? What was it that had you going on a regular daily basis as a youth?
Also, as a youth, I played a lot of soccer. I enjoyed that. I'm not a big guy, so I didn't get to play football or anything. I did some track in high
What'd
school.
you do in track?
Then got shin splints, so that kind of curved that. But I played drums, so I played in the band. I played in the marching band, the jazz band. I was involved with the drama club, so I did a lot of stage stuff with them. So I really enjoyed it. We did a number of big high school level productions. One was "You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown." We did, and it was almost an all junior high school class cast, and I got casted as Charles himself.
Wow, how about that? So what was your event in track?
So I did the high hurdles, and then I was I did the long jump, and then I was also a sprinter. So I could do short. I had the record in high school of doing the shuttlecock run, where you run, grab an eraser, run back. And I had the record that held for years at the high school. I mean, because I was a small guy. I mean, I was 4'11" as a freshman. I was the smallest guy in the school. And I used to say that I used to spend more time looking out of the vents of the locker than looking at the lockers, because they would stuff me in a locker, close the door. So
Well, it's anyway, hands across the water as a fellow hurdler. So very nice to make the connection. So there you are. What year do you graduate from high school? So 81, you get out of high school. Do you go, hey, I think I'm going in the Navy right now?
So my brother went to Massachusetts Maritime Academy before I did, and I really was enamored with the school. Obviously, living on the water, all your friends have boats, and you go out on boats, and we spent a lot of time out in the water. It was just instilled that sea air, was very important to me, and so it just I knew that I wanted to be part of, whether it be the Merchant Marine or the Navy. I wasn't really sure at the time. I was, kind of working my way through it, but I knew I wanted to go to Mass Maritime. And when I was a freshman in high school, no, I'm sorry, when I applied to Mass Maritime Academy, placement out of the school into the industry was 94%. So if you went to Mass Maritime, you were going to step out and step into a job that paid very well, because merchant marine officers, would made good money and still do. And then when I graduated, less than 7% of my class went into the industry. And because that's when then all of the shipping jumped out of the American flags and put on Panamanian flags and Liberian flags, and they unflagged all the U.S. Ships because of the cost of maintaining them to the standards that were outlined in the Code of Federal Regulations, the CFRs.
So there was a shift in the incentivization of getting into the maritime industry. So when do you enter the Massachusetts Maritime Academy? What year did you graduate, rather?
Oh, I graduated in 85.
So what was the decision? Obviously, all these jobs are drying up. Is that what drove you to go into the Navy?
It was. When I first graduated, I started captaining because I had my, I had a third mate unlimited license, and I had which is equivalent to, I think back then it was like 1,000-ton master's license. And so I was able to find work to captain private yachts. And I did that. I did that for, a couple of seasons, and I realized that this is not for me. And it was a long talk with my dad, who said, listen, you did very well at Mass Maritime Academy. And, have you thought about, because I took my commission at graduation. I was commissioned into the Naval Reserve. And I decided that that I didn't want to get stuck in this industry forever, captaining private yachts. So I actually applied to go back and go on to active duty, and that's the history.
So what do you were you a brown boot flyer, or were you a black shoe ship driver? What was it that you got categorized as a naval officer?
So at Mass Maritime Academy, at that time, there were only 2 degrees you could go. You could go with engineering or deck, what they called marine transportation or marine engineering. And so it was it was a hard one. It was a toss up, because I really enjoyed doing both, because freshman year, you get exposed to both sides. And then by the end of your freshman year, you have to decide whether you're going to go deck or engine. And my brother was an engineer. So for whatever reason, at the moment, I decided that I would go deck. So then you spend the next 3 years learning how to navigate and learning how to, use celestial navigation, and how to handle cargo, and, all of those things. And you end up with a big pile of certificates that, so you can, how to work with LNG, and you know how to work with container ships and ro-ros and all that kind of stuff. So the long story short is that when I got into the Navy, they sent me to be an engineer on a guided missile cruiser. So it was the exact opposite of what it is that I went to school for. But, I loved it. I absolutely loved being an engineer. I was the main engines officer, and then it was a 1,200-pound steam plant. And the main propulsion assistant, which is kind of like the assistant chief engineer, he's the guy that does that. It's always been an LDO, a limited duty officer that's, very focused in their career. So they were running low on engineering LDOs. So they said, hey, Rocky, we'd like to have you become a test subject and become an engineer, an MPA, as a surface warfare officer. And I went, okay. And I became the standard, and I knocked it out of the park. Matter of fact, the guy who ran the engineering inspection board, very, very big, very prominent position, they came to inspect us, and we passed with flying colors. And he actually, at the debrief, the outbrief, he says, I don't say nice things about officers. He says, I don't really say nice things about anybody. He says, but I got to tell you, Captain, you have the best MPA on the waterfront. And so that was a feather in my cap.
So are you an East Coast sailor or a West Coast sailor? Both.
Yep. I spent the first part of my career on the East Coast. And then once I got promoted to or selected for captain, they sent me to the West Coast, and I really spent most of my time out in the West Coast, with the exception of going to the Naval War College in Newport and going to the Pentagon for 3.5 years.
And at what point did you retire? Was that out of the Pentagon?
No. So after the Pentagon, I became a Commodore, and I went out to Guam, and I had command of 13 ships. And then after that, typically, so in the Navy, at any given time, there's about 5,000 captains, 06s. And out of those 5,000, there's about 60 Commodores, because it's a title if you're in command of other commands.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you explain for the audience, because Commodore at one time was the 1-star rank of the Navy, but now it's a title. In a different interview, we had someone who had been an ensign and a lieutenant junior grade saying that he was the first lieutenant on board ship, and he had to explain that. I'm not going to explain that in this audience. And now we have Commodore, but you are a Navy officer with the rank of captain, which is the equivalent of colonel in the other ranks, other service components. What exactly does Commodore mean in Navy terms today?
So so in the early 80s is when they discontinued the Commodore rank, and it became a title. And it really is defined as you are in command of other commands. So the first time I was a Commodore, I had 13 ships, and each ship has its own commanding officer, and those commanding officers work for me. And then the second time I was a Commodore, went to San Diego, I ran an organization called Navy Beach Group 1. And so I had about 2,500 sailors. I had annual budgets of $75 million. It was a $30 billion worth of assets that were under my command. And I had 5 subordinate commanders. 2 of them were captain of the same rank, but they worked for me. So it was a real honor, and I got to do it back to back, which was really, not a very common occurrence to be a Commodore more than once.
So you've been relied upon. It sounds like you had a whole bunch of financial budget levels that you were responsible for, whether it was in the fleet or in the Pentagon or a combination of those. Sounds like you were responsible for probably multiple thousands of sailors and civilian employees. Now, come on, play with us just a bit. Give us the big number if you know it. What was like the largest number of personnel under the watchful responsibility of Commodore by holding a position, the U.S. Navy captain by rank, Rocky Rochford?
So the first time I was Commodore, I had about 1,000 sailors that worked for me. And then at Navy Beach Group 1 was about 2,500 sailors and Marines, because Navy Beach Group 1, its job was to bring the Marines ashore. So when you have an amphibious assault group, an ARG, amphibious readiness group, an ARG, there's about 2,500 Marines that are on there, called a MU, a Marine Expeditionary Unit. And they're the ones when that group of typically 3 ships is ready to go and do an amphibious assault somewhere. So the ships don't work for me, but the folks who bring the Marines ashore with the equipment belongs to Beach Group 1. And then all those ships have well decks where they flood the well decks, and the back of the ship opens up and you can drive in and out in the water, and you can carry hovercraft. And I would certify all of the well decks from the West Coast all the way to Japan. So all the ships that had a well deck.
So that's a whole lot of maintenance and upkeep and responsibility for doing so, which means you must have been in the billions as far as the amounts of money that you were managing. And then you've got what in today's terms would be, if necessary, in the Pacific. If we needed to use all those forces, it's returning to the island hopping of sorts that was done in World War II, if we needed to get to that point, and the knowledge of what's available at all of those islands as we're doing that, and being able to shore up those moments where there are shortfalls at any one of those locations. But what year did you retire?
2018, October the 1st.
And what was what are you doing today?
So today,
now hang on, let's categorize things for folks. It happens to be May of 2026. And that way, in the future, as people are listening to this interview in the multiple years to come, they can go, oh, that's when that was. All right. So May of 2026 today, what have you been up to lately?
So when I retired, my wife and I, we bought a motorhome, brand new, beautiful motorhome, and we drove around the country because we had been all over the world, but never really around all of the country. So we wanted to do that. So we did that for about a year and a half, and that RV became a sardine can with just two of us and two small dogs. So we decided that we would come ashore and drop anchor. So we came back to Tampa because we've been here for over 36 years total, and we love it here. And so we decided that I started looking around like this retirement stuff is for the birds. I just couldn't do it anymore. I hated it. So I was looking around and I made the mistake of watching too much news on Fox News and realized that, Congress is really broken. So I decided in 2023 that I would run for Congress. I came very close to beating my Democratic opponent in the 2024 election, and I decided I would run again, which I'm doing, and I'm I'm running for Congress. I was just at the White House last week. I got my interview for endorsement, and we'll see where that goes. That in the 20 years that this Democrat congresswoman has been in that seat, I'm the one who had come the closest to beating her. I took over 44% of the vote, and and I bring a lot of leadership, and that's what I believe the people of Tampa Bay were looking at is what can I do when I get up there? So what I've decided to do was stop. I didn't want to be talking nonstop about, what I'll fix, because it's not who I am. That's not what the military taught me how to do. You're going to show up, you're going to have a plan. You're going to you're going to have a solution to the problem and you're going to have a plan on how to implement it. And that's exactly what I did. So far I've written 34 bills, draft bills for when I get to Congress. And they cover everything from retiring the national debt, healthcare reform, children's bill of rights, and there's a whole bunch of other.
Well, I think you've caught this interviewer a little off guard because it's amazing that here I am stepping into an interview with a retired United States Navy captain who held the position of Commodore, a very responsible one, only to find out that you're running for Congress for the Tampa, Florida area, and that you've done this run before and given the competition a run for the money. All right, so tell us a little bit about what are your goals as a member of Congress? Because as I go back to my mom saying, hey, you got to read this book. It's an interview with Harry Truman. It's called Plain Speaking. And in there, he says, essentially, you end up in a position of responsibility and you never prepared for it. But it sounds like you have a prepared way forward. So impart some of that preparation that you have. What are the goals that potentially Congressman Rocky Rochford, has that he's bringing to the table for the United States?
Well, thank you, and I am very excited, and I'm districting that just happened here in Florida. Governor converted this district that I'm running in. It was a D+8 when I ran against Kathy Castro, almost beat her. So and then after the election, it was redesignated a D+5, and now with the governor's redistricting, he made it an R+11, which it's very unlikely that any Democrat could win in an R+11. It's unlikely they can win in anything over R+5. If as long as I win the primary, I will win the general election. So that's the first step in all of this is that's where we are. And what I've done is I've prepared. Like I said, I've written 34 bills, but it was really for my ability to be able to convey to people that I've not only thought about these problems, but I've researched them to the nth degree, and I know how to fix them. And I know where they, like the national debt, I know where it went off the rails. I had to go back 40 years to figure out what happened to our national debt and how we ended up in this terrible place, and it really comes down to, it's very simple. People who say we need to balance the budget don't understand the national debt because balancing the budget only treats a symptom. It does not cure the disease. And the disease is Congress. And it is their spending that has caused where we are. And instead of looking at protecting and taking care of the people that they represent, because really a congressman represents one district, but also the state and everyone in the country. And a lot of the laws that they vote on are about caring for people around the world. So there's a huge implication to that. So this is much bigger than it's much bigger than me. I can assure you of that. I'm not doing this for fame or fortune, but I've taken my problem-solving skills, which I think are pretty well honed, and I've been able to build these things to be able to help our society. I mean, to retire the national debt, it's 10 bills, and I've called it the Legacy Act, and it's actually an acronym because I'm all about acronyms, Navy. But the acronym isn't really very descriptive. We don't want to leave a legacy of debt to our children and our grandchildren. And so without going into the details of what the bill does, it has never been done before. And most of the stuff that I've written, the healthcare reform, these things are going to be very difficult to pass. So that's why I'm a huge proponent of Article 5 of the Constitution, which is the Convention of States. Because the Convention of States, which has never been used before, although written into the Constitution, is the only true power against Congress. Congress has never had any challenging power. So that's why I'm a huge proponent, as is the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been speaking with someone who, as we say here on Veterans Corner Radio, a veteran, and our veterans are worth their value in gold, and maybe even a little bit more so now, from somebody by the name of retired United States Navy Captain Robert Rocky Rochford, who has his humble beginnings in the most Irish town in America of Scituate, Massachusetts, spent a lifetime of 33 years in our United States Navy, and now, as it turns out, is running for Congress. Sir, we wish you all the very best of success as you proceed forward. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to Veterans Corner Radio with your host, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Joe Mulberger. The views expressed on this program are those of Joe and his guests and are opinions based on the best available information. In matters of law or governmental regulation, it will always be best to check with the appropriate agency. Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll join us for the next program on Veterans Corner Radio.
Here's a quick final thought. If you're enjoying these podcasts, why not take a minute to subscribe or mark Veterans Corner Radio as a favorite? It's easy, and you'll be set to be among the first to find out when new podcasts are published. And thanks again for listening to Veterans Corner Radio.